I was about 22 years old and I was interning for a legal aid office in San Francisco. We were working on a class action suit against a negligent landlord. And I was going door to door interviewing the Spanish-speaking tenants. The building was in disrepair, issues with mold and plumbing and so on. It was a 2-story building, kind of like a motel building. And yet it seemed that nobody knew each other. They didn't know their neighbors. Even with a shared enemy, so to speak, they were disconnected. I went from apartment to apartment, hearing identical stories of unfair treatment, but these folks weren't really sharing their stories with each other. And what I most remember were the large televisions in each small apartment. During every interview, some part of the family was staring at a TV screen, looking numb. I'll never forget the image. It sticks with me today, and the worry I felt for our world if we come to replace human contact with the television. Now, let me just say right up front, I am not anti-television. I have my shows. My children have their shows. We enjoy the entertainment, but sometimes I ask myself what it's replacing in our lives. When I was younger and maybe more idealistic and less tired, I put a post-it on my TV screen that read, "Is there something else you could be doing?" just a little something. But I like to keep an eye on these passive entertainment sources in my life and in the life of my family. So studies have been done on the way we find social connection with fictional characters on television. It's called a parasocial relationship, where we actually feel like we know these people, and they become a social surrogate for us. I have to admit that this did subconsciously happen for me a couple times. I'll be talking to a real, actual friend who is going through something, and I'll say, "You know, a friend of mine," and then mid-sentence I'll realize, oh my God, I am talking about Christina Braverman from the show Parenthood. But my first thought is, she's my friend. So, okay, some of us are finding company in likable characters on TV. Is that so wrong? No, it's a nice comfort in a lot of ways. It troubles me, at least in my own life, if it's replacing personal, reciprocal relationships that feed me on a deeper level. I believe the same goes for Facebook, and I'll get to that in a moment. So social capital is a term for what's possible when people know and trust each other. Robert Putnam, the source of our earlier reading, wrote a book called Bowling Alone in the year 2000, and it was about how everything from PTA meetings to town meetings to bowling leagues have dipped dramatically since the 1960s. And he said the percentage of Americans who recorded any time at all spent informally socializing, like parties or visiting friends, fell steadily from 65% in 1965 to 39% in 1995. And we have not bounced back. Putnam says some of the reasons for this shift in civic engagement are an increase in the pressures of time and money, with more two-career households, suburbanization, sprawl, and commuting time. And he says two of the biggest culprits pulling us away from direct contact with each other, face-to-face contact with each other, are television and the internet. Now, like me, he is not opposed to these mediums. He's just keeping an eye on them. Because this dip in associational ties, it comes at a cost. The less we're spending time together, the less trust and reciprocity exists in our society. The old, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Together we get stuff done. Putnam mentions a t-shirt for a fire department's fundraiser that reads, "If you come to our breakfast, we'll come to your fire." We're not showing up for each other. But it seems we're doing less of that in our society. More often than not, I feel like I'm engaging systems more than people. I felt the sting of this when I was in a bad car accident. This was just after my son was born. He was like a few weeks old. I was alone in my car singing a song at a stoplight, and a woman hit me from behind, going 50 miles an hour. So I blacked out. I was not conscious at all of what had happened. The young woman who hit me, I'm told, stepped out of her car to call her parents, and she never approached me to see if I was okay. She refused medical attention, so there wasn't a physical reason. I'm guessing maybe she was afraid to face me. A witness did approach me, and she called 911, and I was taken off in a stretcher. To this day, I have never spoken to nor seen the woman who hit and hurt me on that day. The woman who gave me a year plus of physical therapy 3 times a week. The only people I talked to were insurance and hospital and other officials who didn't really have any stake in the actual incident, who were doing their jobs. It felt so odd, strange. I thought that in a connected world where people try to know each other and try to figure out how to do right by each other, yeah, the accident still would have happened because we all make mistakes. But maybe this young woman in a connected world might have felt able to come check on me. Or maybe might have written me a note of apology after the dust had settled, because there was no legal question of fault. In my ideal world, I would imagine, I'd sit in physical therapy and imagine what it would be like if she met me 3 times a week at that physical therapy office with a coffee and a muffin. And we came to know each other, and she offered to watch my very new baby, in the waiting room while I took the time I needed to heal. What sounds crazier, this fantasy or the complete distortion of relational accountability that actually played out and plays out so much these days? We all have a big or small story like this where we have felt that disconnect. The numbers show that we as Americans are in many cases bowling alone, raising kids alone, facing a negligent landlord alone, and in general making our way alone. And this affects how we treat each other in ordinary and extraordinary circumstances. The standout exception to this aloneness is the seat you are sitting in right now. Faith communities remain the #1 gathering point of people in our country. Of the people who are stepping out of their private routine to connect in person, the majority are doing so in their faith community. And these places are known to serve as training grounds for social capitalists. After bowling alone, Putnam went on to write a book about American faith communities called American Grace. He says, in faith communities, we provide an important incubator for civic skills. Religiously active men and women, and you know who you are, they learn. They learn to give speeches, to run meetings, to manage disagreements, and bear administrative responsibility. In part for these reasons, churchgoers, he says, are substantially more likely to be involved in secular organizations, to vote and participate politically in other ways, and to have deeper, informal social connections. Get this, regular church attendees reported talking with 40% more people in the course of a day, an ordinary day. Of course, he's preaching to the choir, right? I mean, we know this. We know this. But it's nice to have a Harvard social scientist do the legwork to quantify what we feel in our bones. And what we feel in our bones is that life has been better since we connected here. That we are more connected to life because we are connected here. And so our worship services, our committee meetings, our small group ministries, the lighting of a chalice where 2 or more are gathered, these things are changing the game. And theology matters not. It's the coming together that is the antidote. We dare not underestimate the power of a place like this. And so we dare not miss a choice to welcome someone new into the power and help them feel at home. We ask people to raise their hands if it's their first time here because we don't want to risk their not being noticed. Don't want to risk the possibility that someone could come and go from here without being spoken to, without someone knowing their name. We have an Exploring All Souls program for newcomers starting just today, so that folks can connect with each other in a small group context and feel they're known and seen. The Growing Unitarian Universalism Facebook page says, the 3 most religious words in the English language are, I see you. I see you. We can't underestimate what that feels like, especially when someone has felt unseen for too long. Putnam's studies of faith communities found that it was theology and worship style that got someone in the door, but it was making a friend that gets people to stay. Now, we can't expect All Souls to be a match for everyone who walks through the door, but we can do our best to make that time when you're the new kid brief and merciful. I've seen you do this. I've seen the gentle, I don't know that we've met before. I've seen the, can I help you on your way? Can I help you find your way? This can easily make the difference between someone coming back or not. People have to overcome a lot to visit here for the first time, starting with the inertia of what their Sunday mornings have already been for a long time. And then there's unsettled personal history with religion, or maybe a spouse who isn't interested, or doubt in the point of it all, or what is this Unitarian Universalism all about? If your hospitality could help people overcome these things, you would be helping them find what you have found here, and that is huge. And then, because being connected here strengthens that person's connections to the wider world, as we've been talking about, you would be building social capital more broadly. The capital that builds trust and reciprocity. The stuff that really affects our day-to-day on the roads while we're driving, in our neighborhoods, all the places we're interacting with people. And that is very big. Very big. And as much as Facebook is connecting people and building social capital in its own ways, it cannot, I believe, replace what is possible when humans interact face-to-face. With our LOLs and our smiley face punctuation and so forth, we try to add dimension to the words we send each other over cyberspace. But the truth is, face-to-face interaction gives us a world of key information that helps to build trust and helps to build social capital. So I have to say, I'm a little conflicted about social media. As long as we're using it to supplement the personal ties we are already still cultivating with our in-person connections, I am for it. And don't get me wrong, I love that I can exchange messages with the young woman I grew up with as a child, and we never would have connected if it weren't for Facebook. So I love those possibilities. But if for some of us Facebook becomes a surrogate for personal, in-person connections, I get worried. And I get worried when at night I realize I am only half listening to my husband while I'm scrolling through people's updates and pictures and so forth. It's like, really? Oh, that sounded difficult. Yeah, click, click, you know. I worry about that. So the psychological studies and my own gut tell me that these outlets just aren't quite enough to nurture us fully, to give us what we need to build durable community. There's something fundamental about showing up for each other, and I feel we have to be vigilant. about doing so when the world is more and more leaning toward physical isolation. Now, to give social media its proper due, I did two things this week in preparation for this sermon. One is I signed up for Twitter. I don't know if anyone here is on Twitter. Are you on? Is anyone on Twitter? So as a minister, I can't dismiss the social networks like this that have helped people to connect, and this is how a lot of people are communicating. So I am now following BBC News and Ellen DeGeneres and my brother Chris. So we'll see where that takes me, but it was a start. It was a start, and it was kind of a leap for me. And the second thing I did was I interviewed my close friend, who is a very active person on Facebook. And I wanted to know the ways that it fulfills her. So one thing she says is that she's in a fitness support group on Facebook. She and her workout friends post what they call sweaty selfies after they've done their workout, and they cheer each other on. And she has said that I'm working out in my living room alone, but because of these connections on Facebook, I don't feel alone. And I believe her. I know that there's truth to that. It's not an either or game, really, right? It's not connect online or connect in person. But generally speaking, technology like the telephone and Facebook, they tend to add value to relationships that already exist. Relationships that were built the old-fashioned way, such as my reconnecting with a friend who I've logged days and days and days growing up with. Such as the worship service that Rebecca held online during the snowstorm, which would not have been possible without the community already built here in person, day after day, month after month, year after year. When all is said and done, we don't want to be alone. We want to be seen, we want to be known, we want to be cared about. Computer scientist Jaron Lanier wrote a book called You Are Not a Gadget, in which he compassionately, very gently, compares us all to kids seeking attention. Listen to what he says about social media. And this is a total insider. This is not someone critiquing from the outside. But this is what he says. People can now perceive themselves to be getting enough attention through social networks and blogs. Separation anxiety is assuaged by constant connection. Young people announce every detail of their lives on services like Twitter, not to show off, but to avoid the closed door at bedtime. The empty room, the screaming vacuum of an isolated mind. We don't want to be alone. So we can find many ways to not be alone. Yes, in America, we are showing up less to PTA meetings, less to town meetings, less to bowling leagues. We're showing up religiously, pun intended, to the computer and TV screen. And though faith communities are still the #1 gathering source that is still active, in the big picture, our numbers are dwindling too. And why does that bother me? It's not that I believe afterlife salvation is at stake. It's that I know what coming to a place like this does for me and my family in this life. How we get to put our busy lives in perspective, remind ourselves of our better angels, and make friends who help us through. I want to share with you some photos on my laptop, and I'm going to cue it up. I love it. So, here we are. Last Sunday, some 45 souls from this congregation did not bowl alone. We made our way from church to Waterford Family Bowl. We ate lunch together, and we played together. In our conversations, I learned that some of us are doing really well, some of us better than before, and some of us are struggling with a challenge. I learned that someone had suffered a loss, Someone has started a radio show. Someone got a haircut. And someone had a hidden talent for bowling. 2 people realized that they are next door neighbors. Some of these things could have been found on an internet post. Others never would. There, under the psychedelic lights with Let It Go from Frozen blasting off the walls, there were high fives and trash talking, hugs, and new connections. That is where the magic happens. Old-fashioned people magic. And how about that image that Sean Elliott captured of our pile of bowling shoes? This is the kind of magic that fosters trust and possibility. The kind that makes endless snow that much more bearable. The kind that keeps us whole. Let's do our best. Let's do our best to live like we know how true this is.